All right, we're back with Joyce Gioia. Joyce, where are you right now, by the way?
I am in my office in Austin, Texas, just having returned night before last from 19 days at sea aboard Holland America's Volendam, and it was wonderful, just wonderful.
Well, my cruise line clients will appreciate the plug for sure.
We
but
should definitely talk because I know a lot about cruise lines.
awesome, we will, and we are. And Austin, Texas is one of my favorite cities as well. Longest restaurant, bar, music street I think I've ever seen in my life. Um, but
You have
with
an
that,
open invitation, Mark, to come.
awesome, I will take you up on that. And with respect to that and traveling, um, you have obviously a unique background, human resources, journalism, all that type of experience. Share with us, speaking of traveling, what a road warrior is and what it means that you were selected to be the first one of the year
For USA
for
Today.
USA Today.
Right. A road warrior is simply someone who must travel to do their job. And in fact, MSNBC is now using that term to describe their army of mostly young women who are covering the
I
candidates.
noticed that. They actually have a special on of four of those young women talking about their road warrior ring, if you will.
Yes, yes, yes.
Fascinating.
And it means a lot to me to have been chosen by USA Today as their first Road Warrior of the Year. And the reason is that I was selected from among 2,000 people for, I guess, my ability to talk in sound bites, but also my responsiveness. Whenever I received an email from USA Today's Road Warrior editors, I jumped on it right away. And I think that there are a lot of leaders who don't understand the value of public relations. They just don't understand the value of getting their name out there. And so they may get an email from a journalist and they'll back burner it. But I don't do that. I front burner it. It goes in front of almost everything else that there is to be done. Because I know that when I get my name and my image out there, that it's meaningful not only for me, but for my organization. And that means a lot in terms of helping my business to grow. Also, as a result of my having been chosen as their first Road Warrior of the Year, the Road Warrior panel for USA Today is now 16,000 people strong.
Holy
It
Toledo.
was 2,000 then. It's now 16,000 people strong. And yet they haven't chosen a second or a third Road Warrior of the Year since I was named. So I'm going to keep being USA Today's Road Warrior of the Year until somebody says, I can't do that.
Well, it's interesting because we stress our ability to have a sense of urgency with our clients, which is exactly what they want, which is basically what you're talking about to a great degree. Um,
Yes.
and in this day and age, it's needed because things are moving fast, and they have to have timely information and timely results. So I can get it. Tell us how you've evolved in your career. Including your involvement with I find fascinating futurists, and and
Certainly.
have you arrived at that infamous where you wanted to be when you grew up type of thing?
Never on that one,
I
but
got
we'll
it.
get back to that. I began my career in high school. I founded my first business called Jack and Jill Parties for Children. I trained young people my age to go to children's parties and entertain. And then we would cut the cake, we would have the kids close their eyes, and poof, we were gone. That was fun and somewhat lucrative at $15 per party at those days. That was a long time ago.
Yeah.
And then when I graduated from high school, I did a lot of different things. I was campus representative for Great Books of the Western World. That was a learning experience, as you might imagine.
Right.
I worked in libraries a lot to supplement my allowance. And I almost always worked in libraries, except when I spent a summer at Harvard when I had 5 other jobs, including babysitting French children, which was an opportunity to practice my French.
Vous parlez français maintenant?
Oui, je peux parler français.
Ah, tu as bon accent. OK, continuez en anglais.
Merci beaucoup. So I worked in libraries until the time that I graduated from college.
Oh, sorry.
No worries.
Go ahead.
Thank you for reminding me.
Mm-hmm.
And then when I graduated from college, I had a problem because I was 20 years old, and in those days, if you've ever seen Mad Men on television,
certainly,
in those days, women were relegated to secretarial positions and bookkeeping positions, and I had none of those skills. I had a good brain and a good voice, and I could talk, basically. And I ended up calling the right person at the right time and ended up working in an employment agency, of all things. But in Denver, in those days, they were not paying fees. So I loved the work, but I didn't like charging applicants.
Yeah, not the way to go.
As you can imagine, right? So I ended up leaving there, but not before I was top producer for 2 years in a row. The first 2 years of the company's existence, actually.
Mm-hmm.
And I ended up working in retail. I won't bore you with those details, but I was walking down a street in Denver, and I met a fellow putting sample cases into the trunk of a car, and I said, "How do you get into road sales? I think I'd like to do that." And he said, "There's this guy in New York who hires women. If you can tell me how to get to the airport, I'll tell you how to get into road sales." Isn't that a great story?
I'm always negotiating.
And so we did that. And he referred me to a fellow in New York, and I ended up moving to New York. I'm fond of saying I was imported to New York to work for the world's largest manufacturer of bridal gowns, which is a company named Alfred Angelo. Still exists. It not only has an online presence, it has bricks and mortar stores now, and it's a wholesaler of bridal gowns. So it does everything.
Mother plug.
And I spent a year and a half with Alfred Angelo until I ended up getting married. And then I had various small jobs until my first daughter was, I guess, about a year and a quarter. And my husband was not happy. He was not happy that I felt like I had to go back to work, but I was dying. I was really dying, trying to be a homemaker and housewife because it just wasn't me.
Sure.
And when I started to go back to work, and I first started on the telephone, and then I went into the office and I worked for Modern Bride Publications, and then I did extremely well for them, and I was asked to come back and work for their couture promotion one year, and they said, "Okay, but you have to be in the office full time," and I said, "No, but in 4 days I'll do as much as anybody else has done in 5. And they said, "Well, we'll see. We'll give you a month, and we'll see how it goes." Well, in 2 months, in 10 weeks, I had made budget for the first time for the entire promotion. And basically, I was pretty much done except for cleaning up some loose ends. So they were just thrilled. And from there, I went to George Morrissey, who was then the publisher of Modern Bride magazine, and I said, George, I've done this great work for you at Modern Bride, which was, by the way, just on the telephone. I said, I want to get into national space sales. And guess what he said? We don't hire women for national space sales.
Yeah, I'm shocked.
Not surprising. So I ended up working national space sales for Playgirl magazine.
Oh, interesting.
and it was at Playgirl that I met some people who were very influential in my life, including the director of advertising for U.S. Pioneer. And U.S. Pioneer at that time was the number one hi-fi stereo company in the whole country, and their sales eclipsed everybody else, and they were something like 60 or 70% of the market. They were doing extremely well at the time. And he, when I left Playgirl, introduced me to the publisher for the Complete Buyer's Guide to Stereo Hi-Fi Equipment. And that was really pivotal for me in my career, because I was able to become publisher of that magazine, and I doubled advertising revenues 5 years in a row.
Not bad.
Until the industry could no longer support me in the manner to which I had become accustomed. And I left there and ended up working for an agency, an advertising agency in the direct marketing field, through contacts that I had made through that organization and on that job. And what I have learned, and that's part of why you're interviewing me, is that who you know can be extremely important. And people don't get to be CEOs without knowing that typically. But networks are vital. Networks are vital, and I do a lot of nurturing that network. I also talk about it on television, how important networking is, because I talk about how not to lose your job to a robot. And one of the things that I talk about is how important it is to maintain your network, and that is to keep in touch with them even when you don't need them.
Well, it's like keeping in touch. The banker usually gives a loan to the guy that doesn't need it. So it's just kind of related but not related. And so go ahead. Yeah, networking is a critical part. We talked about that to all the executives we work with as well. But yeah, continue.
So while I was doing one of those jobs in the direct marketing field, I began to speak at conferences. And people would come up to me and say, you're the best speaker we've heard. And by the way, I was talking about the future of direct marketing, because I had been a member of the World Future Society for a number of years by that time in my life. And I always believed that if you could help others to know what was coming and they could successfully position themselves, then you had a friend for life. And as the publisher, I was able to double advertising revenues because I was a source. I was always telling them, you wonder why the yen is not going up? This is why. I was a real, I would take information and I would process it, and then I would give it to others. I also, while I was there, created something that was unique in the special interest publishing field. Well, not exactly, and I'll explain to you why. When I had been at Modern Bride, one of the things that they were doing was merchandising programs. And merchandising programs, I discovered, were my competitive edge, because when I got to the position of publisher for the Complete Buyer's Guide to Stereo Hi-Fi Equipment, I said, okay, what do I need to do to solve problems for my customers being the manufacturers of the hi-fi and stereo equipment. And so I realized that if I could help them sell their clients, that would make me irresistible. That would make whatever my value proposition was irresistible to them. And so what I did was have my editor write reviews of pieces of equipment that would be out in the marketplace 6 months later. And then I scheduled those for a particular issue. I published the pre-publication reprints. I showed up at their booth with a pile of reprints and said, here, these are going to be in our magazine. This will help you sell your product.
Interesting stuff. There's a lot of interesting, valuable points in everything you're talking about there, including the networking and relationships, because we see that all the time where people, not to their discredit, are working so hard at their jobs that they forget to keep the relationships up, or they just don't have time, if you will, to keep the relationships up and take care of that. But it's critical, especially as you get older, looking for board positions potentially, things like that. So,
Yes.
So that's how you've evolved to.
And by the way, as long as we're on that topic, I have been on the steering committee for the Edison Awards, and I just found out that my 3-year term is up with them. And I have also been on the board for the World Future Society, and I am no longer on that board as well. So I am actively looking for board positions.
Well, we can talk about that. So thank you for sharing that, and we're going to take a pause and come right back.